Hello and welcome to another daily Muppet, Father's Day edition over here in the US. So you're not going to be getting a big long live or anything like that today because I'm busy, but I thought I'd do a little video anyway to cover a few things. Um, with a settled mind, having slept on everything and seeing where we are at, I want to talk about the Victor Gyokeres situation again, considering there are still a few interesting kind of reports and things being said by individuals like Fabrizio Romano and such that are out there. Talk about the Ekitike stuff. Talk about some of the sales as we're actually starting to see some potential movement on the outside at United, which is still a fundamentally important part of anything that we want to do in order to afford all or more of the targets that we would like to bring in. So let's get right into it. So speaking on Victor Gyökeres again, as I was saying yesterday on this, here's my understanding of the situation. It was in a live, so figured I'll just recap that quickly on this video and then talk about kind of where it stands and where it goes from here. My understanding of the situation is that because United have been pushing forward, they wanted a bit more of a concrete answer as to, hey, if we try to make a deal for you, are you willing to join us now? Are you ready? And essentially the reply back or the answer seems to be, I'd rather wait right now and see if Arsenal are going to do something. Now, the part that's a little confusing, I suppose, is one, who put it out to the press? That's one question I have, because if I get off of my high horse a little bit for just a second, personally, with any player, um, Brian Mbeumo, 2 weeks ago, per my information, preferred Newcastle. I guess it's more like 3 weeks ago now. Yeah, actually, geez, that's dragged on a bit. Brian Mbeumo 3 weeks ago preferred Newcastle to United and was more likely looking at a move to Newcastle than United. United stayed in talks for him. There was no outright brief. They stayed in talks for him. They pushed, they spoke about different things. They convinced him and said, "Look, we want you to pick United. We want your choice." And he chose United. We didn't kill him for it back then. I think the issue here is that we've been interested in Victor Gyökeres for quite a while. It's been building for a while, and then suddenly, like 3 weeks in, multiple weeks into the process, it's like after a week of we're talking, we're exploring all the stuff going on. A week in, suddenly it's like, well, actually, I prefer Arsenal. Now, some of the reports that came out said he wouldn't join United. That's not true. And I said rejection, but because to me it's a rejection. Um, so I'm not changing my mind on it because I still want people who want to join United. But at the same time, you know, I think the difference is we convinced Mbeumo before anybody else made an offer or before he waited to see for sure if they were going to make an offer. Like he didn't wait for Newcastle. However, if I go to another example, Lenioro last year, he waited. He wanted Madrid and he waited and he waited and he waited and he waited until mid-July. And then he said, and then we put in an offer to his club, got the deal agreed and said, "Come on. We got you." And he moved. And I fucking love it. I thought it was a coup, all things considered. I think the difference is it feels a lot worse when someone says, "Hey, I want to join Arsenal," than Madrid. I feel like as United fans, we're all used to Madrid being the destination. We're not necessarily insulted by people saying, "I would love to play for Madrid," because half of our best players went to play for Madrid. It's different when it's a club like Arsenal. So my feeling on it is interesting, I guess. I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I still think it's more or less unlikely at the moment. That being said, there are a few factors here. One, if Arsenal don't come in for him, he's open to joining United. That's always been the case. He prefers Arsenal. He was waiting for a deal for Arsenal. He wanted to wait a bit more to see if Arsenal come in, but he prefers a deal to United. If it hadn't come through the press, that was still the case all week, frankly. I think I even mentioned it on Friday that Arsenal were serious, and if Arsenal came in for him, he would go for them. So, it's interesting, but essentially what Romano says is that, we're still in contact, we're still there, we're still kind of want to see where this ends up. And I think a big part of the reason for that is beggars can't be choosers in a way is part of the problem. There's not that much by way of alternatives. We talk about the next player in a minute here on this. There's not that much by way of alternatives that work. If Arsenal don't go in for him, it also clears a very easy path for the purchase. And I somewhat wonder if that's why we're kind of not opposed to the whole thing in the first place. Because if Arsenal don't go in for him now, it makes negotiations with Sporting a lot simpler. It makes it so that we're the only team in for him at that point. We can probably get a better deal. And then, on the player side as well. So, like I was saying yesterday, I don't think the club will necessarily feel the same as me, where I feel like it's come out, I don't want him anymore, even though I was very hot on him. I'll probably change my mind if, Wednesday a report comes out, Ornstein, Gyökeres has decided he doesn't want to wait around for Arsenal. He wants Manchester United. They're ready to submit a bid. Will I change my mind and be like, yes, thank God, let's get him? Absolutely, I will. I can be that guy. That's fine. But the reality is, look, Cunha is the best case scenario, which we ideally would get with everybody. But we had to convince Lenny, and he waited for Madrid. We had to convince Mbeumo. He preferred a different move at the time, but we convinced him. So I guess we'll see where this lands. It's not totally dead. It's not totally over. And a big part of that too is frankly the alternatives, and that's what I want to talk about next. So we keep United keeping in touch on Gyökeres, open to the situation. Interestingly, the Arsenal reports today are like Arsenal are not going for him. So I also wonder, did his agent just like fuck up here and say like, no, we're waiting for Arsenal, thinking Arsenal were going to come in for him, and then we said, fine, well, we're not in anymore, so your move, you go over to Arsenal, and Arsenal like, well, wait, hold on, we're not ready to submit a bid, we're not actually that interested, and now you're left in no man's land. Because I could see something like that happening. United put it out there, then his agent goes to Arsenal and says, okay, we're not going to United. We've turned them down. We're coming to Arsenal. We're ready. Are you ready to put a bid in? And then suddenly Arsenal's bluff is called. And they're like, well, no, actually, we're going for Šeško. We're not going to put a bid in for you. And it's like, and I think that's where you feel like, well, should we take the player in that case? But anyway, there's going to be a lot of split opinions on all of this. I do think one of the reasons people were so quick, besides me, we're so quick to turn it down is because a lot of people didn't want him in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. But again, one of the big potential reasons that we might want to be staying in the race and are keeping up on the situation and not just walking away or turning the player down if he ends up wanting to join us, is because of the alternatives. And one of those being Hugo Ekitike. Now, Ekitike is somebody United tracked back in 2021, 2022. They decided he wasn't ready at that time. He was on the verge of making a big move to Newcastle, had even agreed all terms and such, and then backed out, went to PSG, had one okay season there. Then Enrique arrived, and between Enrique and the management, they decided that they didn't really want him. He didn't get a move done at the end of the season to Frankfurt at that time. He sat out the next 6 months, didn't play at all, went to Frankfurt later on and has had a decent season. Now, United have made contact with the agent, and they've kept tabs on this situation for some time. The price is almost double their valuation at present. They're not going to go anywhere near 100 million. They can't even open talks at 100 million. Frankfurt would have to come down to I would guess no more than 50 to 60 million on the price for this to be within reason. Even then, you have let's just look at something for a moment. Even then, United were okay with going for someone like Liam Delap, who is Premier League proven, which has been a big part of this. Some of the players they wanted to push this summer. Um, in the Premier League, they'd seen him. Wilcox knows him from the City Academy, and he had a 30 million release clause. Ekitike represents a much bigger risk in terms of the way that they've been approaching transfers this year. And from my conversations with people I speak with, I'm not getting like a load of encouragement on the thing, because essentially the biggest factor being the price. It's not that they're not willing to, buy any young players or anything like that. But for example, Tyler Dibling, they rate him extremely highly. They think he's great. But at 80 million, it's not even a discussion. It'd have to be half of that. And Ekitike is essentially in the same boat. They've had those conversations. I think that because Vivell knows the club side of it, knows the people there, it's probably likely he's had a conversation, and then people can run with this club to club talks and things, and make it up to be a bit more than it is at this stage, because as of now there's nothing substantially going on with it. There's no offer being prepared. They're not ready to make a bid or anything. Could they decide to go in for him? Sure. But if they're going to submit a bid, it's going to be like at half the valuation that's been mentioned in the media at 100 million, and it just feels like that would be extremely unlikely. And again, it goes against their goal of not buying young players for hugely inflated prices and having these failed transfers that are immovable at that point in time. So that is that's kind of the essentially where things are at the moment. They've had talks with his representative. There's probably been some contact from Vivell to the guys at Frankfurt to know what the price of the deal is and all of that. Beyond that, not much else. And this is essentially why we're keeping things open on Gyökeres, because what are the alternatives now, right? When we look at it, Victor Osimhen, which to me is the only choice. If you're not getting Gyökeres, you go for a proven player. That's my opinion. That they are interested in, that they've been following, but at 500,000 a week or so gross pounds, they just don't want to break their wage structure like that. So unless that changes, it's unlikely to change for them. The price is not so much the issue there. Gyökeres, who, again, as we just discussed, they'll just keep up on and see. Maybe he changes his mind. Maybe they convince him. Maybe it's like Lenny Yoro and Arsenal, except it's not Madrid, but we'll have to get over that mentally. At least the club will probably not have the same hard line on it that I might, or that some of us might. But their alternatives aren't great out there. The alternatives are not great out there. Mateta is a player that they've liked, but he's likely to be 65 million. The valuation, he wants to stay at Palace. The valuations mentioned are so much more than what they value him. It presents the same problem, that if you could get him for 30 to 40, that would be very different. So very difficult situation. It to me, the striker market has been a mess, because Chelsea have inflated this young player market with these insane overpays. 100 million thrown to Mudryk, 100 million to Caicedo, 100 million to Enzo, 100 million here, 100 million there. Just crazy prices everywhere. It has inflated this young player market, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And that's really the issue, is the price is just so far over reality that it makes a deal like Ekitike near impossible to consider. Chelsea are also interested in him, but they're not looking to pay that kind of money right now. Liverpool are also interested in him, and when they move Darwin Nunez, they'll likely try something too, but I doubt they'll be approaching 100 million after buying Florian Wirtz for 150 million euros. So doesn't leave you with a ton of alternatives, and I think that's why they want to keep it open. It does mean that really we've got to get Bryan Mbeumo done. I don't have any news on that, good, bad, or indifferent. But like I shared on Friday, the stuff with the Spurs stuff was overblown. games being played, trying to negotiate. And what that does tell you is they're not agreed. Again, they want a bit more guaranteed than we want to offer at this point. But obviously at some point here we're going to have to push that to say, look, this is what we can do. This is where we're at. I've said before, they are willing to walk away and not pay if it's not their valuation. Dibbling remains of interest. Again, the price on that would have to be realistic. Semenyo is obviously one of interest, but the price on that would also have to be realistic because they don't value him at 60, 65 million either. He's more in the 40 to 50 bracket also. So complicated on these forwards, and Premier League experience is kind of important. Now, if we had a lot of money, we could go maybe put it on the table for a few of these things to just force it through, just a little bit extra, but we have to be so disciplined financially at the moment. Garnacho is one of the situations that I think is going to be really, really difficult to resolve personally. You saw Fabrizio kind of confirming that Leverkusen, despite the interest from Ten Hag and all of that, it's unlikely because he wants to stay. And that's why I was saying the other day, it's him, putting these off with these demands, but it's also more like kind of like demands that make them not want you or make them turn away from you because he wants to stay in the Premier League. The problem again here is that I just don't see where. I think he's overestimated himself in terms of the interest from other clubs. We haven't seen anything concrete from Arsenal. City are not going to go for him. Chelsea have been going for Jamie Gittins. Now, if they can't get him done, maybe they will move for Garnacho. But they've had concerns, and he's obviously not their top priority at the moment. They're looking at a striker and Gittins and continuing to follow that. So City not going for him. Arsenal, we haven't seen anything. Chelsea have other priorities. Liverpool are definitely not going to go for him. Newcastle doesn't seem like the type. They have other targets, Antony Hojlund, a few others. We've seen no mention there. Tottenham could be one that makes a little bit of sense, but again, we've also heard nothing on that either. So the only one kind of remaining in the upper kind of echelon of the Premier League is Aston Villa. Aston Villa financially can't do anything at the moment. Now, obviously, maybe this opens the door up to United working for some type of deal for a player that they have, but then you have to look at why would they do that? Why would they give us, say, Morgan Rogers for Garnacho? Why would they want to let go of Rogers to buy Garnacho? That doesn't strengthen them. That's why I brought up, like, what about Ollie Watkins as just like a thing? Like, they can buy Garnacho, we get our 50 million profit. We can buy Watkins at a good price, amortize it. That still unlocks the ability to go spend a bunch else there. It gives us a senior striker, and we use Xerxes, Cheeto, Enzo out on loan for a year, and then next summer we come back. How did Xerxes do? How did Cheeto do? How did Enzo do? Are any of these young guys ready to take up the mantle? Otherwise, we go back in the market for our future striker while we have a more senior one in Watkins. I'm not saying it's the best idea, and I'm not saying that we're doing that or that that's info, but that's just my thinking of I don't know what else can be done because I don't see them selling us a player that they really want. And I don't see a route out for Garnacho in specific if his demands are to be in the Premier League at the wages that he might genuinely be asking for. Turning down these other moves seems very, very short-sighted, I guess. But I guess we'll see what happens on that. It remains difficult, and I cannot say that I believe there's that much interest in him in terms of spending, of somebody wanting to pay a lot of money for him. You understand what I mean? Like, from my information, I'm not hearing that there's inquiries where clubs are sitting there saying, hey, I want to pay 100, I want to pay 60, 70 millions, things like that. So, that kind of thing. So yeah. Basically, yeah, that's the situation. It's going to be a tough one to sort out. And in terms of Antony, there is movement. As I said the other week, Betis are looking for a deal for him, and they were going to come back in with an offer in the next week or so. And it seems like they've had new meetings now, and they're coming with this offer. The reports from Spain that I think are decent reports for Betis claim that they're feeling pretty optimistic about getting a deal. There's been a few today. It's likely to be a very interestingly structured one because they don't have the money. So obviously they know we're not going to accept 15 million for him or something like that. But what it sounds like they might do, and it sounds crazy. And I said in my tweet that like people are going to have to kind of accept it because it sounds off, but it's actually not bad. What's being proposed is a loan with obligation, but an obligation is multi-staged where basically you buy the rights 1 year and the next year to the player. So how would that work? Let me explain what I think how that works. Um, you loan the player to them. Next summer they're obligated to buy 15 million for half of Antony. Now, if they were to sell him again that summer for 30, they'd be due half of it and we'd be due the other half, if that makes sense. So we would still own half the player. Then the obligation is, like 50% 1 year, 50% the next year. So it's kind of just like an installment, but they actually don't even get to own the full player. It means they can split the amortization up. I don't think you can do that in England, but I think you can in Spain and some other countries. So you're splitting the PSR impact where you only have to count half at a time instead of the full impact of the player, and that way you can maybe it stretches it out better. I don't really get it. I don't totally know because their calculations are very different in Spain than they are in England. I don't totally know how it all works, but essentially that's what they're proposing. Now, my understanding though is that regardless of how they structure it, as long as it's an obligation, we can count the sale right away. It gives us the freedom, player off the books, the money comes in the future. That's not a big deal. As long as we know the money is coming and the obligation is there, that shouldn't be a problem. So I'll be interested to see if that kind of offer goes. It's complicated, probably take a bit to sort out, but it seems like one the player would like and that they would like. So we're actually making some progress here because we might have an offer that's decent. I mean, if it's 15 million and 15 and it's 30 overall and we can count 30 right away, bite your hand off for that. That will work. That could get it done. And that'll give us more room to spend this summer. So that would be a good deal. On Hojlund, there's more noise from Italy that they're progressing on this now, that they're looking to wrap up Bunny and then move on to Hojlund as well, that they've held more discussions and that, they're going to work on what kind of a deal would look like here. Now, obviously, again, United do need to figure this out because we can't really let go of Hojlund and not have I mean, we can. Look, let's be real, we can. But that's the line anyway, that we need to get a striker, and then we would be willing to let go of Hojlund. I think we are willing to let him go anyway. From the info I have, we'd just be willing to sell him regardless. But it would certainly help our budget, again, if we had a way out for Hojlund in one way or another that were to, raise some funds, make some money, things like that. So that's where we're at on everything. It does seem like we're expecting some this Inter thing's been slow, and we're talking about the same topics over and over, but they are starting to move on the outs. The Garnacho one seems a bit stalled, but Antony and Hojlund, we're starting to see some progress. We could have a deal for Antony lining up. We could have something for Hojlund that would work for us. The biggest thing I think in this coming week, it's still early, but the players do return in 3 weeks. And so we are getting to the point where I do believe, I'm not setting weird deadlines and things, but this coming week, we do need to start to see some progress now again on these ins. We can't be stalled for another whole week. That would be a bit worrisome to me. So that's kind of the summary of things. Gyökeres, we still remain interested, still remain open to him, still remain willing to probably convince the player. I've got my qualms with it, but regardless, a big part of, but it's not that dissimilar to Mbeumo. It's not that dissimilar to Lenny Yoro. So we'll see what happens with that. A big part of that too is the alternatives. We've made contact over Ekitike. The price is outrageously well beyond our valuation, but we'll see where it goes. Most of the noise is coming from Frankfurt at the moment. So it's being played up as of yet more than what it is. But we will see if they decide to open real talks this week and submit an offer or something. Maybe that even scares Gyökeres to say, hey, we're moving on. Arsenal aren't going in for you. And he changed his mind. You never know. You never know what the games might be. But we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens on that. We'll see what happens on Ekitike. If they decide to submit a super low offer and maybe, Frankfurt have a complete change of heart and decide, yeah, you know what, 60 million euros is enough. And then we'll see if that works. If Chelsea and Liverpool immediately make the same offer and what happens then. That's why I have severe doubts on this. But the contact has been made just to check on the situation. And that's all it is at the moment. So we'll see if it progresses further this week. In Mbeumo, there are more talks to happen. And we need to get this second bid ready and going in this week. The Garnacho situation remains difficult as he turns down those options outside of Europe. And there's not really anything concrete in England as of yet, or outside of England around Europe. Antony's moving forward with Betis, where we may get an offer that could work, but it may take some time to figure out. And Inter are expected to make their move for Hojlund soon. So that's the summary on this Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next one.